And we are live. How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Wardy, and we are back at it with our latest Mets news and rumors live show here on WardyNYM, your number one source for all your type of Mets content. And thank you all so much, everyone, for your great patience. Was supposed to start the show earlier in typical fashion. I was, of course, late, but I sincerely apologize, and I appreciate everyone waiting. I also want to give a massive shout out to Alex in the live chat. Happy birthday to you. I'm hoping I can share some good message your way regarding the Metropolitans as we are officially in night one of MLB winter meetings. While I don't anticipate anything crazy to happen tonight, again, we'll see what happens tomorrow, Tuesday, and of course wrapping things up on Wednesday. It's going to be a hectic time, not only for the Mets, but for baseball as a whole. And we have a lot to get into, a lot of new updates since the last time we did a live show that I'm excited to share and break down with you all. This is slide 1 on the graphic. As you see, slide 2 we will get to shortly, but I'll give you a sneak peek. We will, of course, get into all the latest in Yamamoto, Jung Hoo Lee, the Mets' latest reported target. This time on the offensive end, we'll be getting into Jordan Montgomery, Eduardo Rodriguez, Shota Imanaga, of course, breaking down a little bit more on the Mets out, most importantly in Shohei Ohtani and those Juan Soto sweepstakes, and everything else regarding the club in Queens. So there's a lot to get into, and we're going to try to do our best to do exactly that in however long of a time that we got going today. I appreciate all my live members first watching live on our replay, my concurrent viewers. You guys know the drill. Make sure to smash that like and subscribe button. Thank you kindly again for the endless support, and happy Sunday, everybody. I don't know about you, but this has felt like a Monday to me, because since I woke up today, I've been on my computer grinding, working on content. Came out with the Jung Hoo Lee video. Highly implore you all to do exactly that by checking out later if you haven't already, but we'll break down more about him and his game, what I like and maybe what I don't like in this potential Mets pursuit, along with so many other things going on. Again, this is going to be a hectic time. This will be live show number 1 of, I'd imagine, at least 5 live shows over the next 3 days, if not more, depending on the type of breaking news we get. We'll be live every single evening, barring breaking news, obviously, going over the latest in winter meetings, our free agent frenzy streams. As of now, tomorrow, I'm going to be co-hosting with my man, Draftneck Mark, barring any changes. He'll be joining tomorrow's show. Tuesday, as of now, we'll be having on Pat Ragazzo, who does a great job on the beat for the Mets, covering through a affiliate with, pardon me, I can't even talk right now, with an affiliate with Sports Illustrated. He is representing the Mets as one of their multiple beat writers there on the beat in Nashville during winter meetings. So we'll be having a live reporter with us on Tuesday, barring any changes. And on Wednesday, I'm planning to bring on a different guest as well that is yet to be seen who exactly that's going to be. A lot of content, short period of time, lots is happening in Mets land. And of course, if you guys find out any key updates regarding the Mets or anywhere else, make sure to let me know here in the live chat as we're talking along together. And people on replay, same applies, smash those buttons. How's it going, all you beauties? Grant, my man, how you doing? Rube, Keto, CP, Robert, Dave, my brother, how are you? Everyone, you absolute beauties. John, going down the list further here just for a second. Tim, my man, McBride. Let's see, Scott Miller, thank you so much again for the membership. And without further ado, how are we feeling, everybody? I know you guys want moves. You want moves more than Luis Severino, Joey Wendell, and of course the latest pickups the Mets have done, and which I actually don't even have on the graphic. The latest Mets move that they did that is on a smaller scale was in Mr. Scrub that I know people were making jokes of yesterday, so we'll get into that too. Mike Puma just reported Yoshinobu Yamamoto is coming to the U.S. within the next week to meet with MLB teams. The Mets will be among those teams. I will, of course, expand on that shortly, and I have a lot to say on Yoshinobu Yamamoto and the said controversy that is going around with him and these rumors right now. Nothing's wrong with him. Nothing's wrong on the Mets end or anything like that. But there is a little bit of a spiel I want to go on later in the show with the reporting on Yamamoto and what we should be taking as fans and what we shouldn't. There's a lot more to get into. Scrub, thank you so much. I appreciate that, John. If someone could please do me a favor and tag me on Twitter into where the Mets picked him up over the past 24, 48 hours, I would greatly appreciate, just so I can give you a slight rundown, even though there isn't much to be said on that front. But move small to big, especially before we really get into anything big this offseason, I want to try to cover to an absolute T for you guys. Some of these players aren't warranted of doing individual player breakdowns on, because there's a great chance that they're not even going to be with the club past spring training. That's assuming they even get a spring training invite. But some of these guys do have reasons to break down. And Scrub, actually, now that I remember, he's nothing more than a minor league move that will be a minor league pitching option. Nothing more, nothing less. So I don't need to expand too much more. But again, happy to have you all in here. Edwin, great member of 17 months, says, Tower, these so-called fans on X need to relax with all the comparing Cohen to the Wilpons. Cohen's he isn't worth roughly $20 million for nothing. You're absolutely right. And I will say this. I'll just say this right now. there was a misunderstanding a couple days ago when the Mets did another pickup of a minor league. Maybe it was Kyle Crick, as a matter of fact, that was on a minor league deal that we'll get into shortly. I said, oh no, wow, another Wilponsian move, and we were supposed to expect less when new president of baseball operations David Stearns. That tweet got a lot of impressions, a lot of traction, as I thought. I like to joke with Mets fans every now and then, especially the ones that are still stuck in the Wilpons mindset, that depth moves naturally mean that they're going to be everything for the club next year, when in reality, none of the guys that the Mets have picked up so far, outside of Severino and Wendell, will likely have an impact on the club next season at this current rate. But it is funny to me how fans, of course, react to these type of news. But I do want to get into, just not only how hilarious that was, but clarify when I'm talking like that. If you know me, then you know it's a joke and you get along with it. You know it's sarcastic. For the people that don't know me, you, of course, took that at face value, and that was your first mistake because you don't know me. Make sure to hit that follow button on Twitter in case you haven't already. But thank you for the tag, John. You're an absolute beauty. Appreciate all the support from you lately. But I'm going to start off the show by getting into the latest pickups for the Mets on the smaller scale that maybe you don't know too much about to this point, just sharing my personal opinions on them. Then from there, we'll get into the Mets wish list this offseason, entering winter meetings over the next couple days, which begin tonight. What are the Mets trying to get done during these winter meetings, in particular before Wednesday's conclusion? We will break that down. And then, as you see, I'll just transfer here and show you guys a second graphic tonight so you know what to expect. A lot of updates, of course, I will get into on all said players, all the guys that the Mets are connected to this point. So without further ado, let's hop right in, everybody. Think we'll sign Woodruff? It's a possibility, but anything but a guarantee, that is for certain. Wouldn't it be a Wardy live stream if he wasn't late? Exactly. I think you guys either love it or hate it at this point. But again, appreciate everyone chiming in. Let's start this thing off finally and get into the first expected pickup that I know other people have talked about to an extent. I haven't had the privilege to do so because I've been covering everything else happening with the club to a T for the most part. And this move has yet to officially happen, as it will not begin until at minimum middle of January, when the international free agent signing period begins for prospects. And talking about an international free agent that the Mets are expected to sign, one of the bigger names out there, Vladdy Miguel Guerrero. Now you might be wondering, Vladdy Miguel Guerrero, that sounds awfully a lot like Vladdy Guerrero Jr. or Vladdy Guerrero Sr. Could there be a relation? Absolutely. That is Vladdy's younger brother and Vladdy Sr.'s son. So there you go. Another big bopper in the family, this time a kid that bats from the left side of the plate, plays the outfield. I'm really curious to see how he's going to project at the MLB level. A plus power bat that is hopefully going to be a nice impact for the Mets and carry on the family name impressively. We've seen how well his older brother and Vladdy Jr. has done. Let's see what Vladdy Miguel Guerrero will do at the MLB level in the ensuing years going forward once he officially signs pen to paper with the Mets. It's unofficial. It's been reported from Michael Mayer and others. And you even had Vladdy Guerrero's cousin, who's over playing, if I'm not mistaken, he's playing in like Dubai area right now with the United Baseball League that just started up, which has Bartolo Colon, Alejandro De Aza, and Robinson Cano, among many other former major leaguers taking part. And when Guerrero's cousin was asked about the latest on his, family, he said how Vladdy Miguel Guerrero will be signing with the Mets, even though it's not official yet. So that's the first real update, if that makes sense, that we haven't broken down too much. And there's not much to say. It's not like I can throw out a lot of great stat lines for you because these are kids scouting reports. I'm literally talking about a teenager right now. So it's a little hard to dig up those archives. So it's really more of a wait and see. And when this move does become official in January, I will likely do a more thorough breakdown on the player then. But I definitely want to know your initial interest. Not news from Mayer. Yes, he isn't necessarily the first to break it, but he was the first to announce. I'm pretty sure Michael Mayer over the past week, when he first discussed this about Vladdy Miguel Guerrero, this is what sparked it. This is what initially sparked the conversation. If it wasn't your post, Tyler, you got my trust. Edwin, thank you so much for the donation. Greatly appreciate it. Let's see. I'm sorry. Vladdy got $100,000 signing bonus. He's not even a top guy. You do realize he's actually not that good. Nathan, you're the same person who said on Twitter today that Jung Hoo Lee is not a good player at all and that he's trash. So with all due respect, I'm not going to take your opinions more than a grain of salt at the current moment. With that being said, however, we're going to go from Vladdy Miguel Guerrero into our next. And again, don't take it personal, Nathan, but you continue to surprise me with your daily takes on Twitter. And I'm sitting here wondering, It's almost like it's odd that you're the only person that has certain takes like this. I wonder what the reason for them is. And you're not the only one. There are other fans as well that every single day just have something in particular to say. It's really funny. Oh, I get what you're saying, Jonathan, in the chat. Thank you so much for that. Wardy, when I'm moving to Queens, that's a great question. You know, not right now, but hopefully at some point in the future. We'll get there when the time is right. For those that don't know, I do not reside in New York. I live an hour outside of Philly for the most part. So that is what your boy's doing here in Pennsylvania. Okay, now let's get into this. We talked about Vladdy Miguel Guerrero. Now let's talk about Austin Adams. What do you need to know about Austin Adams? Again, this is a reliever pickup that is zero risk, only upside. Why? This is as zero risk as humanly possible. Harrison, there's nothing to check when Mayor already went over that already. Thank you so much, though. It's appreciated. It's a 1-year non-guaranteed split contract. What does this mean? If the guy does not crack things out of spring training, he can either be sent down to the minors or he can be parted with entirely. There's no risk here. And Austin Adams, when we take a look at him, what is this guy known for? He only throws a slider. Okay. And why is this important when evaluating things? Because small moves mean plenty more than just, okay, it's a small move, there's nothing to acknowledge about. This is the first test of seeing what David Stearns is all about. David did such a great job as president of baseball operations there with the Milwaukee Brewers, in part by taking flyers every single year, which is what more analytically minded clubs do, with guys that maybe have a great put-out pitch but struggle with their command or struggle with the remainder of their arsenal. And what do? They throw them in, they try to develop them in their respective pitching labs. In this case, it would be Milwaukee. In other cases, of course, the Dodgers are in LA. In other cases, it's there with the Tampa Bay Rays. Of course, it's even there with the Atlanta Braves. Now here with the Mets, as they're constantly working on their pitching lab, which has grown tremendously since Steve Cohen first became owner. And the point by picking up guys, even if they do not impress, even if they do not crack the club out of spring training, is to see what they have, because they have shown flashes of brilliance, either with, in this case, a slider, which has been utilized heavily by Austin Adams, that has a phenomenal whiff rate, a great strikeout rate, a career over 13 strikeouts per 9, but a walk rate of north of 6 per 9. That is the issue. Can Jeremy Hefner try to get him right? Can he impress at all in spring training? It's a great question. But to expand a little bit more on Austin Adams, let's do exactly this. Again, an ugly 5.71 expected ERA in 2023. Pardon me, normal ERA, but expected ERA, that and SI ERA, why are those important? Those are the numbers that tell you actually what a pitcher can control. And in the case of Austin Adams, had a 3.53 expected ERA, which is over 2 runs lower than his baseline ERA over this past year, and a 27.7 K percentage, and he throws his slider most of the time. We're talking at least 90%, right around there. It's nasty. He's had success rates with it, but he struggled with the walk rate, and that's why he has not been a consistent reliever in Major League Baseball. Again, one of multiple flyers you're going to see the Mets pick up, and something that I want to expand on here for a second. It really cracks me up how many people out there. What is going on here? My goodness, my God, my gracious, my charger kept getting in my way. What is important when evaluating these little moves is that the Mets are going to do a lot of them. And you're going to continue to see fans out there that are very adamant saying that, oh my goodness, this is Will Ponzian regime again. They're picking up a whole lot of schmucks, a whole lot of nothing. Newsflash, folks, I'm sorry to break this to you, but maybe it is breaking news on your end. Every single club in baseball, every single offseason, get ready for this, they sign minor leaguers. They sign flyers on non-guaranteed contracts to try to show out in spring, to see what you have. Why? Because every single club in baseball never has enough arms for the normal 162 season. No matter how many, on paper, it seems like the Mets have, half them drop by the quarter season, and then bam, you're dealing with guys that have no major league experience that are calling up from either AAA or in some cases even AA. Again, more rare occurrences, but they do happen from time to time. Point being, you want to add as many arms as humanly possible, and you start low, you go all the way big. Just because the Mets' moves so far this offseason have been on the smaller scale does not change the fact that they will be making a boatload on the bigger scale. And the moment that fans start to realize that, the better, so that way they can stop shooting themselves in the foot, thinking, hey, all these moves mean that the Mets are going to continue just to make lower level moves. They're going to do nothing of significance. The Mets still have 10 roster spots they need to fill out. They have an entire rotation they still got to figure out. They have an entire bullpen they got to figure out. They want to add outfielders. They would like to address DH. They have a plethora of moves that they're going to make. So for all the fans out there writing them off early, can we at least wait until a month from now and see where we're on? We are past winter meetings, past the holidays, basically getting into the new year. Then we can have that more thorough discussion where the Mets either missed out on guys or who they land. Was it worth landing? Until then, we need to have patience here, because unlike, pardon me, like most other clubs in baseball right now, there has been a lack of moves. And that has went in direct part with waiting for the Shohei Ohtani domino to fall. Once that domino falls, a lot is going to happen as well. And there are a lot of guys that are banking on their market value in part with how Ohtani is going to be perceived, not only because of his injury history, but also because he's the top player on the market. So just things I want to reiterate your way as always. Let's see. Jokes aside, why are we not doing everything to land Soler? I'll get into Soler later in the show. We'll talk about those DH targets. Really do appreciate it because it's us. We can do that. Wardy knows me. Fern, I do know you. Yes, Fern is a great Phillies fan. I have no ill will with him. He's all good. How about them Phillies? I don't know. I mean, you're definitely, you fixed your mic. Pause. I didn't. I don't know what I did. This is not my Shure SM7B to my left. This is all reliable, but we're sticking with all reliable because it's working right now. We're going to roll with it. Wardy comes to Delaware. There's nothing here but sales tax. I do go to Delaware plenty of times. And yes, I am aware of that, John. Thank you. But getting into, okay, we talked about Miguel Guerrero. We talked about Austin Adams. Kyle Crick, another interesting one. Why is it interesting? Because like Austin Adams, Kyle Crick is another heavy slider guy. If we look at the numbers here for Kyle Crick, again, signed a minor league contract with an invitation to spring training for the New York Metropolitans. Crick didn't pitch in 2023, but he does have a 3.56 year rate in his career across 194 career appearances. Now, he throws the slider a lot, and he usually hits around 3,500 RPMs, which is very impressive in doing so. But the concerns with Kyle Crick is, one, he didn't pitch at all this past year. Pitch a sample size. I did see, let me see here. I'm pretty sure he did pitch, and shout out to Daniel Wexler for asking this question on Twitter at Wexler Rules, because I screenshot this the other day. It looks like Crick sat out 2023 after opting out of his deal with the Rays in March. And then someone replied, saying, he did opt out, and it looks like he did have a very small sample size in games recently, which he hasn't been all that impressive. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the Winter League. However, I could be wrong. But from the span of 2021 and 2022 and a minimum 100 sliders thrown, no one has averaged more horizontal movement on their slider than Kyle Crick. So again, there's appeal here. The whole purpose is that the Mets are just throwing a lot of guys that have some nasty pitches but struggle with a lot of different aspects of their game and bringing them into the pitching lab and seeing what sticks and what doesn't. That's essentially what they're doing, but it's not as broad as, okay, just any pitcher out there that they're throwing to see what sticks on the wall. It's specific guys that have plus stuff with specific pitches, but may struggle heavily with their command, may struggle heavily with the fastball. And the whole purpose for the Mets here is to see if they can kind of get something out of nothing here, which is what all good clubs in baseball do, especially on the analytics end, because you will need to call up guys, and then injuries will inevitably happen. You're going to need to bank on options that you weren't hoping to whatsoever heading into the season at some point, whether it's mid-season, whether it's earlier in the year, or whether it's down the stretch as you get closer to playoff time. Hopefully the Mets find themselves in that running because they put up a respectable roster. But in order to get there, you need to have as quality depth, as solid depth as possible. And you much rather take flyers on guys that have MLB experience in part versus guys, if you say aren't developing great in the farm or don't have the depth, just minor leaguers in which they have no experience, and you know that they're going to get their tits lit, quite frankly. Pardon my French, but it's true. Once they hit the MLB level, there's always concern on that front. So just want to emphasize that. Yes, I saw the New York Rangers did win 6-5 to all my Ranger fans out there. And of course, guys, appreciate everyone. We have over 500 live concurrent viewers. I'm going to try to get to your comments, questions, and concerns by the end of the show as much as I possibly can. And anyone and everyone that donates, thank you all so much in advance for that. Getting questions on David Robertson, we will discuss him later in the show in the second half, I assure you. So talking about those moves, other moves that can be had against smaller moves, Cooper Hummel and Tyler Heineman have both been picked up catchers. And in the case of Hummel, a very interesting player, plays the outfield and catcher there from the Seattle Mariners organization. And then Heineman, who is, of course, not going to be a major league player for the Mets next year either, was claimed from the Toronto Blue Jays. And I was asked right away, are these moves an indication that the Mets are going to part ways with Omar Narvaez? Certainly would not be the case with Tyler, but in the case of Cooper Hummel, there could potentially be some interest behind that. However, if I'm a betting man, I'm saying Omar Narvaez is currently in the position to still be the Mets backup catcher for next season. I did discuss him in my top 5 video that came out a month plus ago on 5 Mets who will not return this upcoming year. My biggest wild card by far was Narvaez. I knew he was opting into his contract, but if he does perform poorly, especially start out, or if not in spring training, it wouldn't shock me if the Mets parted with him and ate that contract, as they've shown a willingness to do so with other guys in years past who have whether that's a James McCann as a great example. So Steve Cohen is willing to eat money if they make moves that ends up not working out. And Omar Narvaez right now has robbed the Mets of millions of dollars because he was out for a good chunk of the 2023 season, lost his job to Francisco Alvarez, which no one's complained about there. Then when he was healthy and was in there post-injury, was a shell of what you were seeing in that small sample size where he was getting on base and hitting at a good clip. Just Omar Narvaez is a defensive net negative, an offensive net negative, one evaluating his sample size with the Mets, albeit it was small. And when looking up a backup catcher in particular, there are rightful arguments you could make to wanting a more defensively minded guy there, even if he's lacking the bat, knowing that Alvarez is still going to be catching on average 2 out of 3 games of a series, or say 4 out of 5 games out of a week stretch, whatever it may be. So it's interesting when evaluating them, but Cooper Hummel is definitely a fun one to get into because he does have a 420 career OBP in AAA, though has a 551 OPS and 227 big league play appearances. And this is from Michael Mayer Metzmer. Shout out to you, Michael, just reiterating here because, you know, some of these guys, a lot of times when the news happens, I'll find numbers and I'll tweet them out right away. And sometimes I won't get to it right away, so I'm looking for others. And Michael always does a great job as he's representing Metzmerize at this year's winter meetings. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Mike Mayer 22 in case you haven't already. Hummel has played in left field, right field, first base, third base, and catcher, and he was drafted by the Brewers back in 2018. So the Mets catching depth as of now on the 40-man is the following: Francisco Alvarez, Omar Narvaez, Cooper Hummel, Tyler Heineman, and Tomas Nido, who is not on the 40-man. Would like to make note of that. Yes, changes are going to be made there. The fact that the Mets have some of these guys on the 40-man right now is not going to stay that way. Potentially even a month from now, if not sooner, we could see some of these guys par with. It's just waiver claims that you make because you have roster spots to see what you're going to address for the rest of your lineup, and also seeing what guys could you potentially see on the bench for the Mets versus at the minor league level. I don't foresee Hummel or Heineman having an impact on the Mets in any way, shape, or form to begin the 2024 season. But again, just something to make note of, as these are guys that they have claimed off waivers from these respective clubs. And of course, we also discussed briefly the latest pitcher that the Mets acquired, which I want to thank again John in the live chat for tagging me in, as Andre Scrub. Scrub pitched in the Astros bullpen from 2020 to 2021. He was hurt in 2022 and has most recently thrown in the mid-90s in Puerto Rican Winter League. And when you look at his minor league numbers, they leave a bit to be desired there. Again, a guy that will likely just be projecting at the minor league level for the Mets and nothing more than that whatsoever. So I think we pretty much have talked about everything to this point, right? We've talked about all the little pickups. I know we're 20 minutes into this. I know you guys don't want to hear me talking all night about, you know, some Joe Schmo that likely is going to have a great impact on the club. And that's exactly why I much discuss them in the stream format versus doing individual video breakdowns. I do video breakdowns on sort of waiver claims, guys, especially heading into the season, mid-season, where you know that they're going to have an immediate impact on the club. But in the case of the relievers that we have listed here, there's no guarantees that any of these guys are even going to crack spring training, and not even all of them are invited to spring training. So just something to make note of as we're breaking things down. Again, we have north of 600 live viewers. Thank you all so much, everyone chiming in. Hoping everyone is having a phenomenal Sunday evening the way I am, talking shop all things Mets with all you beautiful people, as I will be all week long during these hectic winter meetings. And yes, I say hectic because while things are slow right now, they're going to pick up like a mofo in mere hours over the next 24. So stay tuned for that, to say the least. Now, we've talked about those moves. Winter meetings. What is the Mets shopping list? Well, Andy Martino did tweet out today the following. And again, pretty much we all knew this, but to really emphasize specifically the Mets shopping list they have over the next number of days, it stands as the following: adding at least one outfielder, adding multiple free agent starting pitchers and relievers. Could the Mets be involved in the trade market? Absolutely, but we know that this is a club that's still going to be basing things free agency first, knowing a lot of their targets are involved in that free agent market and makes sense for the club for multiple reasons. So with that being said, let's now advance into our second slide of the day. And this is where, again, you guys are likely clicking on the live show to want to look at and discuss to begin with. Now, came out with a video a couple days ago. Shout out Jordan Simpson, a phenomenal musician who does a fantastic job on TikTok and his social medias, doing his own renditions of the Meet the Mets song, which you guys heard briefly in the intro of the video, and does an awesome job just messing around with music. I cannot say enough great things about Jordan, so make sure to follow him wherever you can. Greatly appreciate. Awesome Mets fan, great human being. I've had the pleasure of meeting Jordan in person multiple times too, or the past couple years covering the Mets when I attend games at Citi Field. But the Mets are officially out on Shohei Ohtani and Juan Soto. While you can never say never when it comes to these circumstances until we find out where these players land, the writing has been on the wall that Shohei Ohtani is likely going to be either a Chicago Cub, an LA Angel, an LA Dodger, or a Toronto Blue Jay. That is the core four we're looking at of clubs that are heavily in on Ohtani. And belief now is that we will see a signing by Ohtani, hopefully within this next week. If it happens during the winter meetings, that would be amazing, because then that would really open the floodgates. But Ohtani, as much as I would love him, and I would love to see the Mets go out to land him, it feels like there's been multiple factors. There's been multiple factors that come into play as to why the Mets are likely not going to land him. And a big one is the lack of stability the Mets have as an organization. Now, I want everyone to sit here and put their bias cap aside for a second and think rationally. If you're Shohei Ohtani and you know what you've done to this point, you know the clubs that have interest in you, you know that you've already had a lack of willingness to go on the East Coast. What about the Mets sells you enough to want to commit on a long-term, north of $600 million contract to go to the Mets versus other clubs that will give you similar, if not around the same money, and will be far more prepped and far more prepared to handle you right away, versus a Mets team that for the second time under Steve Cohen completely revamped their front office and coaching staff and have a boatload of holes to fill this offseason. If I'm Ohtani, I wouldn't want to be here. I'm going to be blunt, 100%. Putting the bias cap aside, why in God's name would I want to be a New York Met over, say, the LA Dodgers? Yes, the Dodgers don't have the World Series, championships in comparison to their great runs each year, but they still have more recent success. They've been dominant for the past decade plus. Why wouldn't you want to be in that situation, especially if you can pretty much just take a quick drive? Well, I shouldn't say quick, but, going over there from Anaheim to LA to be with the Dodgers is a much better trip, especially if he's trying to focus on the West Coast aspect, not being as far from Japan as he would be if, say, he's there with the Mets. So there's a lot of things that you need to consider when evaluating the Shohei Ohtani sweepstakes. And for me, I think it doesn't have to just do with the Mets' lack of interest as it does with Ohtani's lack of interest in wanting to be here. Then you add in the obvious factors that we went through. Ohtani is someone that's going to cost you a boatload of money. Steve Cohen doesn't have problem spending money, but the Mets already have a $270+ million payroll without doing any more moves this offseason. So that's not including Sevy. That's not including Wendell for the most part. And they have all these other areas of need to address as a club that knows that while they're going to be playoff contenders, pushing to be playoff contenders for 2024, they know that on paper, at least, they will not have that World Series caliber type label until 2025 and beyond. That is at least the assumed goal to this point. Okay, so already you can understand why it doesn't make full sense. On top of that, Ohtani, while I would love him and I would cry with tears of joy if the Mets ever found themselves landing him, his injury is another wild card that brings into this because, all right, it's already unprecedented market as is. Now you throw in someone where he's not going to pitch for over a year when he's been known as a unicorn. That's why he's worth north of $600 million, which is what he's going to get. But you don't know exactly how he's going to look when he returns from his second injury. Now, Shohei, again, is a unicorn. I fully expect him to bounce back from his second Tommy John surgery, but that's a question mark. And for a Mets team that found themselves last offseason almost committing over $300 million to Carlos Correa, in which, if we look back in hindsight, thank goodness that didn't happen, you can understand the levels of concerns when committing that amount of money. So, while I fully believe Steve Cohen and David Stearns alike would love Shohei Ohtani, there are valid reasoning on both sides from the Mets' point of view and Ohtani's point of view as to why this is likely not going to happen. And if you're Ohtani, why in God's name would you sign a short-term deal when you still have a guaranteed market of north of $600 million CP? That's exactly why it's not going to happen. It cracks me up that people think that this is something that would actually be considered. I can understand that consideration if Ohtani's market completely got hurt from his injury, but that's not the case. He's still going to make between $500 and $600 million, and for that reason, I think Ohtani's pretty comfortable with wherever he ends up. And I also want to add, I think I left out a key name. I talked about the LA Angels, the LA Dodgers, also discussed the Toronto Blue Jays. I hope I mentioned the Chicago Cubs, because I'm going to say it right now. I think the Cubs could be a sneaky club that ends up pulling off Shohei Ohtani. I think that there's absolutely a world where Shohei Ohtani goes to Chicago, and the Chicago Cubs have the dream offseason us Mets fans were hoping to have initially entering the offseason by landing Craig Counsell 1 and landing Shohei Ohtani 2. I think Jed Hoyer is going to be a bad man this winter meetings, and he's going to do everything in his power to land Ohtani. And Ohtani did make an exception with the Chicago Cubs versus other clubs, in more colder climates to consider signing with when he was a free agent back in 2018, entering the bigs for the first time. So just want to throw that out there on the Juan Soto sweepstakes, where there's a lot going on. There's some stalemates between the Yanks. The Blue Jays are entered. I have a feeling the Blue Jays are going to be used for leverage right now when evaluating the Soto trade market personally. But we know the Mets are not involved in that market. They have a reluctance to part with top prospects for rentals, especially in case of Soto. As much as I would love him, I understand the Mets' point of view by trading for him and knowing for certain he's still going to hit the free agent market, no matter how much Steve Cohen may do his best to sway him otherwise. So understanding it from that perspective, again, not necessarily happy about these things. I would love either to land in Queens, but there are a lot of factors that go into these things, and we have to be realists at the end of the day. If it's not looking like it's going to happen, I'm not going to sit here and spew. There's still a great chance it happens, because as of now, there are very slim odds that either finds themselves landing in Queens this offseason. Wardy, you just explained why Yamamoto is not coming to the Mets with the Ohtani remarks. No, I did not. And actually, let's pivot to Yoshinobu Yamamoto, because I'm going to tell you why Ohtani and Yamamoto are completely different situations. So, Shohei Ohtani and Yamamoto, why are they different? Well, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, unlike Ohtani, has expressed through his agent at least a complete willingness to play in a big market and to play in a big city without a problem. Shohei Ohtani has never indicated at this point that he has a willingness to, one, play in a big market, but two, to play on the East Coast. We've only heard negativity on that front. Yamamoto, we've heard speculation that, he may prefer to, say, be out west, whether that's with the Dodgers, whether that's with the Giants. But that's been very speculative. From his agent himself, at least, it's been very open about when he's marked. And, of course, his agent is going to gas this guy up the best he can right now. He's doing a phenomenal job of it. Yamamoto's market is increasing by the millions, by the second, it feels like. This was someone initially projected to make around a $150 million contract. Then now we're talking north of $300 million, including the posting fee, which is an additional multiple of millions of dollars you have to pay for his club there in the MPB. Yamamoto is at the age of 25. He is a dominant starting pitcher, the best pitcher on paper in this year's market. He checks off every single box of what the Mets are currently looking for. And Yamamoto, again, has had this willingness, is also open to playing with fellow Japanese players like a Kodai Senga, and with Kodai impressed everyone with his Cy Young-esque type season in his first year as a rookie in the bigs. For that alone, you could just tell, completely different situation. So I don't know what about it made you think the same, because you're the farthest thing from it. Until we find out saying, hey, Yoshinobu Yamamoto wants nothing to do with the big market, wants nothing to do with New York, wants nothing to do with potentially playing with other Japanese players. Unless we find out that information, which is completely contrary to what's been spoken of to this point, the Mets are 1,000% one of the top players, if not the top player for him. And we're going to get into the potential Yamamoto controversy having to do with the media here shortly, but I just want to reiterate once more, this is not, and I repeat, not the same situation as Shohei Ohtani. If it was, I will be telling you right now that the Mets are already unofficially out on Yoshinobu Yamamoto, when that is not the truth. Now, am I going to sit here and tell you guys right now that Yamamoto is a guarantee to land here? No, I'm not, because I don't want to get your hopes up. But it's unfortunately, we naturally as fans are going to, because we've been talking about this guy to a T for months and months now. And there's good reason for it. There's the same reason why the Mets are salivating at the idea of landing him. He is in a class of his own. You have Yamamoto, you have a gap, then you have Montgomery, then you have Snell. That you have Snell. Let me do it this way. Yamamoto, gap, Snell, gap, Montgomery, Erod, Shota Imanaga, etc. That's where you go pretty much in the tiers of starting pitching available in the free agent market right now. And Yamamoto rather, again, checks off the boxes, people are already viewing this guy as a Cy Young favorite heading into next season, which is as crazy as it is to say. Who had Kodai Senga getting Cy Young votes after he signed with the Mets heading into this past season? No one. So you have to be excited about Yoshinobu Yamamoto and the prospect of landing him. And before we get into the controversy, I did just want to share briefly a couple things about Shota Imanaga. Shota Imanaga, in my opinion, is going to be one of the more sneaky slept-on players in this year's free agent market. Why? Because he's been overshadowed by his fellow countryman in Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and of course, to a higher magnitude than anyone else, Shohei Ohtani. A lot of people aren't really talking about Shota Imanaga nearly as much, and they should soon, because a 30-year-old southpaw who just posted a 2.8-year array, another very impressive season in the MPB, is going to be taking his talents, hopefully to Queens potentially, as execs stated recently in the Joel Sherman article that we discussed over the past week. week how the Mets are going full bore for both these pitchers. And while the likelihood of landing both is not as great as landing one, it's still very much in the cards of possibility. And Imanaga would fit beautifully in the middle to back end of this rotation as a southpaw along with Jose Quintana, utilizing not only that solid fastball, which sits low to mid 90s, but some nasty off-speed pitches in particular. Really like what he has going there. So Imanaga, another name that we're going to be keeping a close eye on, and especially in the scenario where, say, the Mets don't upland Yamamoto, either because he has a preference to go to the Yanks or be out west, for example, or just because at the end of the day, for some reason, the Mets don't land Yamamoto, whether it ends up being justified or not. Regardless of that, talking hypothetically, if the Mets don't land him, it adds a further adamancy and why Imanaga makes sense. But another question I've been asked a lot is, Tyler, what if the Mets miss out on Yamamoto? Can they put all their attention to Shohei Ohtani? Can they put all their attention to Imanaga? Can they put all their attention to Jordan Montgomery? The issue with that is that if we're basing things on reports to this point, all these guys that are made available are likely going to drop as dominoes sooner than later. Yamamoto is taking his dear sweet time, and recent reports indicate that he is still going to be having discussions in the coming days with clubs, but he's not going to be back in the States for, we're not looking at a Yamamoto decision until earliest mid-December at this current rate. Now, let me pull up here exactly what I saw earlier for you guys. And this is from shout out to Joe DeMeo as well for reiterating this. Not to mention that Yamamoto is supposed to be meeting virtually with teams this week before coming back to the U.S. to meet with the finalists in person. How could anyone have a true advantage without actually meeting? And I'll get into the controversial topic here in a second, but this is a great point. Again, he's going to be meeting virtually soon, and then after that, he'll be coming back to the States. So he was in the U.S. for a short time, right? When he officially became posted, we saw him in L.A. courtside at a Lakers game. Goes back to Japan. Winter meetings begin. We'll be discussing virtually with clubs this week. Then probably after this week or towards the end of this week, he will then start to meet with clubs in person when he returns to the States. So this is not a process that's going to be sped up nearly to the degree as other guys. And because of that reason, the Mets are in a little bit of a tricky situation where they need to act fast, and they cannot put themselves in a situation where, okay, we know Yamamoto's going to take a bit, so we're just not going to sign anyone prior, because I feel very confident in saying Jordan Montgomery, Eduardo Rodriguez, just to name a few, maybe Shota Imanaga, because his market is very difficult to weigh right now because we just don't know much reportedly. To those three, I fully anticipate to drop as dominoes before Yamamoto ultimately makes his decision. So if you're the Mets here in this situation, what is better off? What is the better situation put yourself in? Trying to go all in and add one of those starters in Monty, Erod, and Imanaga, then pushing things on the back burner and going all in on Yamamoto and hoping that you can land those two and then pretty much have things fully set and add, a depth starter still maybe that you maybe do via trade, for example, if you don't do in the free agent market because the depth simply isn't there to your liking per se. Or do you decide, hey, you know what, Yamamoto's going to take a bit. It might be in our best interest to go out and go all in on both Monty and Erod, on both Monty and Imanaga. And my counter to that is, it would be a disappointment if the Mets basically struck themselves out before even really getting to the final stages in Yamamoto discussions. One more thing to make note of in this is there is a world, per se, not necessarily for Yamamoto, but just speaking in general terms here, where you initially think you're heavily in on Yamamoto, right? And then you find out, okay, no matter how much money we throw at him, he's not going to come here. He doesn't prefer to come here, no matter how much you sway him. Like Ohtani, for example, which very well could be the case. In that situation, that would then make sense for the Mets to say, hey, we're pivoting right away. We know this isn't going to happen. We're not going to waste any more time. We're going to go address the area of need the best way we can with these BC options. A lot of question marks regarding the Yamamoto market, but I really want to get into the controversy behind it now. What controversy am I referring to exactly, you might ask? And that, if you guys follow me on Twitter, you saw today, you have reports coming out. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, while the Juan Soto is a key target for the New York Yankees, they still view Yamamoto as their number one priority this offseason, and they are deemed as a favorite. But of course, you cannot count out the likes of the Dodgers, the Giants, the Mets. Then you have a beat writer for the Giants today coming out, and she states how big buzz so far around here in winter meetings is Yoshinobu Yamamoto, and some clubs believe the San Francisco Giants have an edge. Now, what do all these reports have in common from the Giants, from the Yanks, from the Mets over the past week, from the Dodgers over the past couple days? All these reports come from respective beat writers for these clubs. So what do you know? There's narratives being built here. There's belief being built. Yoshinobu Yamamoto's agent is doing a phenomenal job getting the word out and having these things be said. They're all heavily involved in the market, but you're telling me the Giants, the Dodgers, the Mets, and the Yankees are all the number one club to land him right now? I'm sorry, but the math ain't mathin'. It ain't gonna happen like that. One club will be above the rest, and on top of it all, as I referenced Joe's tweet, he hasn't even virtually met with clubs yet. He has yet to do so, let alone meet them in person for the Final Four or Final Three, whatever it may be. A lot of teams want Yoshinobu Yamamoto, but the suggestion that, okay, he's absolutely going to go here or he's absolutely going to go there has continued to be a complete toss-up. Like just the other day, I wasn't going to do a video about, we saw, Mets are deemed as favorites for Yamamoto. Like, bro, we talked about this a month ago. It's the same shit over again. And I understand as a content creator, I'm supposed to reiterate a lot of things, repeat myself a lot, especially in live shows for people first chiming in and things of that nature. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating as all hell. Now we're seeing this trend continue to a point where anyone, a beat writer from every club that has been connected to Yamamoto has pretty much said that they could be a top dog, or they may have an edge, or keep an eye out. They really look like that they could be a top contender, at least a top 2 or 3. The reality is that all these clubs really want him. He's only going to go to one place. So until we really find out factual reporting, more than just our independent beat writers from these respective clubs, but once they get on more of a national scale of reporting, then I think that's where we could take it more than maybe just face value. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, but yes, the MLB offseason and winter means in particular means there's going to be a lot of buzz, a lot of rumors, and there will ultimately be a whole lot of nothing as everyone's going for certain guys and only one team's going to land them. So for all those other fan bases are going to be like, what the hell? I thought we were getting him. Just want to settle everyone's expectations of thinking that anyone is a lock, because we have continued to learn year after year after year. And as a content creator, as someone who has went through the emotions with you, starting with the Trevor Bauer sweepstakes 3 off seasons ago, I can tell you firsthand that I've learned a lot since starting to cover this club, and it's definitely helped mature me in how I approach you guys and approach my content in particular. No, I'm not going to come out here and say that the Mets are a guarantee, that the Mets are going to sign someone when we haven't even found out, besides speculation, that they have reported connection to someone. I'm not talking to Yamamoto, I'm just talking in general here. It's frustrating, unfortunately, how much can be spewed out there versus what you're actually going to get. And it leaves a lot of false impressions, false narratives, and just things that I know can frustrate fans and making them not believe any rumor when there are factuality behind some, just not all of them. And it's important for us as fans together to try to weed them out and see what makes sense, what doesn't. Because there's a lot of reports that are factual, where these people, Ken Rosenthal, Jeff Passan, John Heyman, Bob Nightingale, etc., they found out this information, but it ultimately led them to being wrong because they were misinformed, and the people that informed them ended up being misinformed. Why? Because at the end of the day, players make decisions, agents make decisions. You think it's going to be one way, a guy may switch up last second and go the other way. Speaking of Trevor Bauer, just briefly, I'm not getting on a tangent here. Bauer, before going to the Dodgers, was about to say yes to the Mets. He openly said this in part because he allowed, unfortunately, his website to be leaked where you saw him in Mets gear and all those outfits. When that happened, he felt initially as a duty, at least according to him, to go to the Mets because of that happening, and he didn't want to do wrong. But then after thoroughly discussing it further with his agent Rachel Luba and everyone else involved, he made sure he made the decision that he felt was best for him versus what was best in, say, the public eye. And as fans have a right to be, say, bothered by that, but it just shows you that decisions can be switched up and changed last minute. Nothing, and I truly mean nothing, is a guarantee. Even when I do my videos and say that this guy feels inevitable, yes, it feels inevitable because of reporting that we're seeing and because of what we're seeing at this point, but it doesn't change the fact that we're not going to know for certain until we find out where that domino ends up falling. Mets need to land at least 3 starters. I 100% agree with that one. What's up, Herb? How you doing? And again, thank you everyone so much for the likes, the subscriptions, for the kind words. It greatly means a lot to me. Thank God you don't do it, but the clickbaiting on YouTube is getting disgusting. It is, and I'm going to be also completely blunt. When I started out YouTube, and most of you know this, I was a bit more on the borderline clickbait scale because in part I knew that by addressing in a certain manner, it was going to help get more traction. And I clarified right in the beginning what was going on in said videos. Some people, a lot of people liked it and some people didn't like it. And for those, I understand, and in hindsight, I apologize, but I'm really trying to do my best since then to avoid those type of content. And on top of that, if you ever see me having a really clickbaity title, it's probably going to be more so in the Bridging the Gap podcast. Like, our first episode. Did Brian Cashman just hand Yamamoto to the Mets? Of course he didn't, but it's a nice attention draw, one. And two, then you get to hear us explain what happened with Cashman speaking on Giancarlo Stanton this offseason. Giancarlo Stanton's agent representing Yamamoto, Senga, and others, and his response to that. And while it might not be a great look for Cashman, the Yanks' attempts and landing Yamamoto, like, there's reasoning behind the things we say, but I just would like to make clear I'm going to try to do my best to steer clear of clickbait as much as humanly possible. Because even now, when I'm just making videos saying report, Mets are interested in Jung Hoo Lee, I got people in the comments saying clickbait, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't know, what are you talking about? You haven't watched the video, you schmuck. Maybe click on the video, maybe just read the title. I don't know. Like, is that hard to comprehend? Like, I'm trying to really break it down nice and simple for you. And some people it doesn't wrap around their head. And maybe that's because they were fooled by others that were being more clickbaity. I'm not sure, but it's unfortunate is what it is, to say the least. Yeah, no, Nathan, like I said, at the start, it was definitely more teetering that way, but that also went in hand given the market at the time too. Back then, the content space wasn't nearly what it is now. Since then, I've seen a lot of people, a lot of creators, and they know who they are, who have definitely taken inspiration from what I do, which is flattering, but there's also a difference between inspiration and saying, oh, I'm going to do every single thing you do and just say it's my own. But I'll leave it at that. They know who they are. It's just hilarious to me. We'll see if it gets to the point if they need to call out or not. But let's talk now about Jung Hoo Lee. This is the big one. This is the one that we did a video on earlier today. And I'll say it right away. I did not think the Mets were going to be involved in his market. They definitely proved me wrong because naturally as a fan, I'm thinking heading into next season, especially corner outfield. Yes, you'd like to have solid defense there, but man, oh man, do I want power. Selfishly, as a fan that has seen this team struggle with power in recent years outside of Alonso, of course, Alvarez was a great sight. I'm excited for his future. Outside of him, Alvarez and Lindor, you don't got a whole lot going there. And we've seen in recent years that power has led to championships. Yes, boom or bust isn't everything, but there's a reason why the Phillies were able to have the run that they've had over the past couple of years. There's a reason why the Texas Rangers were able to have the run they did. And that was thanks to immense power from the Corey Seagers, the Marcus Semyons, the Jonah Himes, the Josh Johns. The list goes on and on. The Adolis Garcias. How could I not forget about the biggest name in playoffs this year, right? Prior to his injury. Like, the big bat can carry you. And we have continued to see that. You want contact, but I think you need a balance. And this is not to slight Jung Hoo Lee whatsoever, but because of this initial mindset I had as a fan, I was saying, okay, I don't really see why they would be involved in this market. But now evaluating things now, I can completely understand why they're evaluating Jung Hoo Lee here. Because just because you say add him in a hypothetical doesn't mean that you still can't add power in either the other corner outfield if Starling Marte is not looking healthy and ready to go, if he's not an everyday player, which is why like an Adam Duvall, I don't hate that idea as a short-term option, maybe platooning in that role, has solid defense too. Of course, DH-wise, we'll get into those options here shortly. But Jung Hoo Lee, why do I like him aside from the video I did earlier today? He's 25, just like Yoshinobu Yamamoto. He's a guy who signed him to a 5-year deal. He's 30 by the time that expires. And you're getting Tony Gwynn over there in Korea coming over here to the States. That's their version of Tony Gwynn. Think of the best you've seen from Jeff McNeil and Brandon Nimmo essentially combined into one. Slapping the ball all over the place, going oppo without a problem, thriving with runners in scoring position, which Jung Hoo Lee has done exactly that throughout his entire career in the KBO. He is a multi-time Gold Glover, but something I would like to emphasize I didn't in my video was that the KBO Gold Glove is different than MLB Gold Glove. KBO Gold Gloves are given to players in the best position in baseball. So Jung Hoo Lee has been deemed as the best overall center fielder for a number of years, which is why he continues to get their version of Gold Glove. However, it does not account for strictly defense. So while Jung Hoo Lee has been a very strong defender, he's not getting that award alone because of his defense. It's a collective effort on both the offensive and defensive end, from my understanding. So would like to just clarify that for those that weren't necessarily aware. He, of course, can be toyed in the corner outfield, and then if, say, 2 years out of his 5-year deal, if he looks like he'll profile better better at center field and Nimmo looks better in corner, then you switch that. You give Nimmo some days off next season in general by having him in the corner, by, of course, putting Lee in center. He can handle without a problem. The biggest concern with Jung Hoo Lee is his bat-to-ball skills on the power level, how that can transition to the MLB level. But I think the sooner fans realize that you're not acquiring Jung Hoo Lee for his power, the sooner they realize how much there is to like someone like him, who, again, is a around 400 OBP guy, over 300 average, literally around like a 330, 340 career batting average. The guy has been unbelievable at the KBO level and was slapping the ball all over the place in a small sample size in the WBC this year, including getting some key hits off of Yu Darvish, which is something the Mets as a whole have not been able to do the past couple years. So already, yes, I'm liking those odds. To add furthermore, the Mets have been in negotiation. It's not finalized yet, but the Mets have been in negotiation for a while by bringing in, I think his name is, Jose Rosada as their bullpen coach. And should they bring him in, where did he most recently coach in baseball? It was in the KBO, believe it or not, which I think is funny. And speaking on not only this player here from the KBO, his cousin has to be one of the better relief pitchers coming over being posted. And I'm gonna butcher the name. You guys know where I'm going with this. His last name's Go. I'm always messing it up. Can someone please enlighten me? It's like, is it Woo Suck Go? It's something along like, it's literally like a name that you think you'd find in a Key and Peele skit from a decade ago. I'm blanking on the name. I apologize. I always get it mixed up. Another very, very interesting reliever coming over, but he is related to Jung Hoo Lee. So if the Mets do land Jung Hoo Lee, you have to wonder if that will be at all connection that could prompt the Mets. You know, of course that won't be an X factor, but the guy's uber talented as well, and the Mets need a lot of bullpen help. So it could make sense. He's brother-in-law. Thank you. Thank you. This is why I ask you guys in the chat, because sometimes I'm on the money and sometimes I'm not, just because my focus was elsewhere. Because right now I've been focused heavily on the targets reportedly with the Mets, and the hypothetical ones, the more rumored ones, have been very few on the bullpen scale to this point. It has been such a hard market to gauge, but I think we're going to find out very quickly the type of relievers the Mets go after, and I think it's going to begin tomorrow. I think as soon as tomorrow we will start to see signings for the Mets, if not trades as well. James, thank you so much for a $5 donation. James says, longer Yamamoto negotiations go on, the better for the Mets. They will come a point when a lot of these contenders will get priced out of the market. Absolutely. And right now, at least half the league is in on Yoshinobu Yamamoto. And a very select few will be able to spend the money it will take to land him, which is why I'm not concerned on the Yamamoto front whatsoever right now. It's just, again, going to be a little bit of a lengthier process than maybe fans would like to see, but that happens especially when you're going after a star player of his caliber. Woo sucks go. Is that how it is? Woo Sook? Is it Sook? You say it's Sook? You say it's Suck? Potato? I don't know. All I know is he's pretty talented. And he's another guy that I think we'll be discussing as soon as this week. Woo Soo Go is how someone explained it, like in how you should say it. If that's the case, then okay. All right. We already signed Scrub. That's funny, Mothman. That's actually a good one. Mothman's been an OG too. I recognize you. Marte gone was a factor. Average guy. Yeah, Starling Marte is a huge wild card heading into next year too. I know, Nathan, how much you love Starling Marte. If you know, you know. But this is someone that we're definitely going to be keeping a close eye on next season. And I think it's imperative for the Mets to make sure they operate this offseason without factoring in Starling Marte as a key factor, because Marte's done nothing to this point to prove that he will be a key factor next season. I think the Mets need to operate in a situation where he is very limited and hope that he can prove doubters wrong with not only his health, but when healthy, his on-field production. Because man, oh man, when Marte was out there last year, he was just a shell of what he once was. Couldn't comfortably run on the bags much. Defensively, looked at a lot of times like complete dog shit in right field. And I don't mean that as an insult. It's a harsh reality. He was not good in right field whatsoever. Just left a lot to be desired there. So yeah, definitely one that we'll be following along to a T. But my final thoughts on Jung Hoo Lee, and then we'll get into a bit more on relief pitcher options, DH, before really wrapping up the show here. And again, I appreciate everyone watching. I don't know where we're at on the like count, but if we get to 200 plus likes by the end of the live show, be greatly appreciated. Like I said, guys, we'll be live tomorrow. We'll be live Tuesday. We'll be live Wednesday. Wouldn't shock me if we're live Thursday. And throughout some of these days, we'll probably be live multiple times with breaking news inevitably happening. So just something to follow on all week long for all your Mets news coverage here on WardyNYM. Appreciate that. Done. Jung Hoo Lee. Final things I will say about him. While I love the idea, and I would be very happy if the Mets do end up laying him, it leaves question marks. And I think a big question mark I have, I know a lot of people have been saying this. I didn't mention in my video, even though I actually had intention of doing so, but I truthfully was just on a roll with my recording today, and I bypassed it. Jeff McNeil. And while this could be a non-factor, Jeff McNeil, Jung Hoo Lee, and Brandon Nimmo all profile awfully similar. And McNeil has been a name that has been toyed. Could he potentially be traded? Feels like another offseason where we could be throwing his name out there. Rumors, I know Joe DeMayo has been throwing out that name there with the Mets pod. I know some others have too. Of course, I'm naturally going to refrain. One, because I've been grateful to build a relationship a little bit with McNeil being invited to his charity event this summer. But I'm also a realist, and I'll tell you that it wouldn't shock me if those things become more than just rumors, especially in the scenario where they say land is Jung Hoo Lee, because then it would make plenty sense, given the Mets on the verge of having a Luis Angel Cunha. He's expected to hit the bigs at some point next season. Jet Williams, etc. These guys all play second base. The Mets have a bunch of second base options that can handle, even including Ronnie Mauricio, obviously, that are fringe MLB level or about to be MLB level over the next calendar year. And while Jeff, I would love for him to stay, and I'd love for him to have a nice bounce back year, be able to spread the ball opposite field, there's most certainly a world where he could be toyed with in return for some pitching help. That would be honestly one of the more least shocking things to happen. But the reason why I'm not going to amplify it too much at this point is Jung Hoo Lee has a lot of suitors, and while the Mets may have strong interest in him, according to Bob Nightingale of USA Today, that strong interest still may not materialize to, okay, we're going to go in and land him. Projected contract right now is around 5 years, $50 million, which is more than affordable for this Mets team. But, it's going to come down to location preference. Of course, him playing in Flushing wouldn't be a bad idea. They got a couple Koreans there, just a little bit. Only the biggest area of Asian descent as is when looking at the country as a whole. That borough in Flushing is a big deal, which is in part why I'm sure it's been nice and appealing for Kodai Senga to feel acclimated. He doesn't have to go terribly far to, see things that are like-minded to him, as a fellow countryman in Japan or whatever it may be. And of course, Jung Hoo Lee there would be plenty of things where he can relate to, including the food as well. We'll have no problem getting Korean food there versus, say, some other options where he'd be going. So those little factors may come into play in the Mets' favor here, but more than anything, the Mets definitely are looking to build this club for 2024 as a playoff contender, but they're not building the club this offseason as one we're reviewing it on paper as having World Series aspirations the way we did this past offseason. And I think that's going to end up being the right move in the end because they have a lot of moves they need to make, one, and two, how did the Mets perform with having World Series expectations this year? They were the most least clutch team in baseball. They were horrendous. These guys couldn't handle the spotlight, just like Trump is yelling years ago in his one of his pressers, say, turn those lights off, shut them off. You can't handle the lights, right? And the Mets certainly could not handle the big moment, the same way that they couldn't handle the big moment as soon as they started to finally face adversity with not being consistent winners with their bats towards the second half and the final month and a half of the regular season 2022, heading into that horrendous 3-game set against the San Diego Padres. Last year, World Series expectations, this team was absolutely horrendous. I think a Mets team with a bit of a chip on their shoulder, a new regime, is going to bode them so well next year, and I really think that they're going to be an entertaining club. That's another thing. This team sucked this year so bad that they weren't even good when they won. How many Mets wins this year, especially pre-trading off Verlander and Max, did you come away saying, wow, this team's got it? Aside from those couple comebacks that I saw in person, the Tampa Bay Rays comeback, the Cleveland Guardians sweep, there's not much else going on. This team was trash, absolute trash. And I would like to watch entertaining baseball, especially as someone that literally covers them every single day here on YouTube. If I'm going to cover 100 plus games out of a 162 in a regular season, by God, I want the games to be entertaining, win or lose. And this team was anything but entertaining this year. That needs to change. I fully believe it's going to, and hopefully in part, it may lead to a Jung Hoo Lee signing. So we'll find out what happens on that front. But a couple of things here before we start to wrap things up, folks, that we talked about briefly. Relief pitching options. I would like a David Robertson return, for one. Yes, I know the guy's basically 40, but he would be the Mets setup man, and he would finally be able to be in the role that he was supposed to be when the Mets acquired him a year ago. He didn't like the idea of being parted with at the time, and whether Stearns' interest in Brandon David has yet to be seen, but sign him to another 1 year, $10 million deal. Let's make it happen. Let's run it back, David. I want him back in the setup role for the New York Metropolitans. Even if they are not being labeled as a World Series contender heading into next year, in order to have a playoff run, you got to make playoffs. And I think David Robertson could help that in that regard. He's continued to defy the odds and really impressed me. And I love that he handles the New York market so well, thanks to his long historic success there with the Yankees. So when evaluating the free agent market, he stands out to me. Of course, you have Robert Stevenson from the Tampa Bay Rays is coming off of a very impressive year. A lot of clubs like him, including the Baltimore Orioles of recent, as they're trying to find options for their closer role, knowing Felix Bautista is going to be out for at least the next calendar year, which really sucks for them. Yuki Matsui is definitely another interesting name that will be coming over from overseas. There are a bunch of interesting options, but it's still so premature on the bullpen market. Trade-wise, there are a lot of guys that could make sense. Garrett Crochet, flamethrower, southpaw from the White Sox, would love him. A Devin Williams from the Brewers, but these guys will not come at easy prices, and the Mets are 1,000% going to do what they can to address the bullpen through the free agent market first and foremost before evaluating trades. That is something that they still have to build because they need to fill out a lot of holes. This is not a Mets team that has the perfect bullpen, and they're like, hey, we're just like one middle relief guy away. We're just one setup guy away. No, they have a lot to do on that front. So that is why trying to evaluate exactly who they're going to land for the relievers, I think, is far and away the biggest toss-up this offseason when evaluating all the other areas of need that they have, from the rotation to the outfield to whatever may be left in the infield. The bullpen is without question the biggest wild card. So while I can sit here and speculate and do all these things, the reality is until we start to really hear names, which I think will begin as soon as tomorrow, it's just such a toss-up right now. It really is. And DH-wise, while I don't love the idea of having short-term DH options, this may very well be the route the Mets go down. And a name that I've continued to hear in just rumblings throughout the industry from people I know is that no one should be shocked if the Mets actually find themselves in Justin Turner's market if they're not already. And I understand the pros and cons are completely. Turner's coming off of another fantastic offensive season. Is pretty much a standalone DH at this point in his career if you don't want him to have poor defense in the infield. Would be a Mets reunion. And while I don't foresee him having the same numbers, I think he would struggle a bit at Citi Field because, of course, playing with the Green Monster there in Boston, that type of outfield breakdown versus what is at Citi Field are just simply not the same. Of course, the same as being in LA there with the Dodgers, where offense is so prevalent. I don't foresee that being the same, but short-term options, should the Mets not want to commit to a Mark Vientos, say even if Marky V gets traded. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that is a possibility. If the Mets aren't comfortable with their internal young options at DH to play every day, which it's starting to feel like that a little bit more and more, I wouldn't be shocked if they land Justin Turner on a one-year deal, maybe with a second-year option. Really consider JD Martinez again, even though I'm just, as much as I love Martinez, and he had such a damn good year last year with the Dodgers, oh boy, do I fear that as soon as he gets to Queens, he's going to go back down to more injury-type numbers where he had in parts with the Red Sox in a good portion of the 2022 season as he was dealing with his lower back ailments. I just have that big concern. There's always risk when you're signing, even though that, yes, plus bats, DH, you want them there every day. What kind of plus bat are you actually getting at Citi Field? That's my biggest question mark. Unfortunately for us Mets fans, they don't pitch in a batter's box. And if you're a pitcher, it's great. If you're a batter, it's terrible. It's hell. Anthony Recker, good friend of mine, and of course has co-hosted a podcast in the past, has stated openly how, the batter's eye at Citi Field's not easy as well. It's definitely an adjustment. And in comparison to other parks, you can definitely have your fair share of struggles there. So Jorge Soler, of course, on, say, a 2-3 year deal, I don't hate that idea whatsoever. But do the Mets even want to go past 1 year for a free agent DH option? We don't know that. So while Soler did hit 36 home runs last year, put up very respectable numbers, big swing and miss, he's going to strike out a shit ton. You're getting him for the homers, though. It's a big bopper. It's the same reason why you get Kyle Schwarber. What, you getting Schwarber because of his contact ability? No, you're getting his ass because he's going to give you north of 40 bombs every year. The same way, the same thing could be said here with Soler. But is that a priority for the Mets? Well, we have found out to this point, Teoscar Hernandez, great talent. I think he'd be a really nice fit for the Mets. I still may discuss him in the near future, show the Mets feels like that there. I think Teoscar could be a really nice fit in left field and also toyed at times at DH. I really do like that fit, but we have not seen enough right now. And the interest in Jung Hoo Lee leads me to believe that the Mets could very much be prioritizing more of that type player in the corner, or even what I know Will Salmon came out today in a great piece a Michael A. Taylor, a former Washington National that we all know, that just had a big year for the Twins. Over 20 home runs, still has elite defense in the outfield, and under 800 OPS. But someone that has speed on the bags, has finally found power in his swing, and would be a nice short-term option there in the corner as well. For picking options like that, I certainly want Jung Hoo Lee to take that flyer and see what he can give you. Coming over from the KBO, I really like that idea. But David Stearns has led us fans with a lot of question marks as to the type of offense this team is going to land, because priority number 1 is pitching and priority number 2 is defense. We have not even heard from the man's mouth himself that there are any true specific priorities offensively, aside from initial belief entering his tenure now with the Mets, like he's had in years past, a priority in power when addressing certain lineups. A lot of question marks there on how the Mets are going to go about this. Hunter Renfroe, he could definitely make sense on the shorter term, absolutely. That gives me Brandon Drury vibes quite a bit too, even though that Drury isn't known for his defensive upside to the extent that Renfroe is, even though Hunter is anything but an absolute stud defensively. It's interesting. I'll leave it at that. The offense is the one where I think we're going to be a little surprised maybe with what some moves happen. That's the market where, unlike years past, where we've been so adamant about, hey, we got to go out and get these guys and these guys offensively. This year, it's pitching galore is priority number 1. Defense is number 2. So whether that means defense where you get a more defensively minded guy with a solid bat, that very well could be reality. Whether that means your defense priority is more so on defensive replacements later in game, that could, of course, be the case too. Like a Joey Wendell, for example, who has been a plus defender his entire career that the Mets picked up over the past week. Lots of questions I find myself asking as a fan and as someone who stays up to date following the Club 2T every single day. So with that being said, we're now going to get into a couple of your comments, questions, and concerns. I'm going to wrap up the show here in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but I definitely want to answer some comments for you guys before we wrap things up, as I greatly appreciate everyone's support. Tommy Pham reunion. I love Tommy. I freaking love that guy. I mean, I can't say enough great things about it. Tommy Pham has quickly become a favorite of mine, and he not only buried a lot of rumors and stereotypes about him entering his Mets tenure, but I love the bluntness behind him, and I think championship clubs need the type of mentality that Tommy Pham has on a day-to-day basis. Works his absolute tail off to just try to not only grind, but get back to where he was. Tommy said in recent interviews that since 2017, 2018, he has been grinding his ass off in hopes of getting similar numbers again. That has been his driver, first and foremost, because he knows he fell off a little bit, and he knows that, of course, that horrendous stabbing that he dealt with in San Diego a couple of years ago played a factor. The fact that the guy's walking, let alone performing at his level, is a miracle. Love Tommy Pham. I wouldn't be opposed to a reunion there, but it won't happen, and here's why. Pham doesn't want to be a platoon player. He made it known entering this offseason. He really wants to be an everyday guy. Unless all the everyday opportunities diminish this offseason for him, I foresee him signing somewhere, regardless on where that is, on the type of fit, just somewhere where he can play every day. Think of the Cincinnati Reds 2 off seasons ago when he signed there. What, you think his ass wanted to be in Cincy? No, he went to Cincy because statistically, it's the best batter's box in baseball outside of Coors Field. And he knew he could gas up his numbers quite a bit and then be a trade chip elsewhere for the second half of that season, in which in that case, he was dealt to the Boston Red Sox along with Eric Hosmer, respectfully, as Eric came over from the San Diego Padres at that point in time. So, yeah, love Tommy Pham, but I don't see a reunion happening. Travis Jankowski's a beauty. I don't see that happening either, though, and that's perfectly fine. Rhys Hoskins is definitely an interesting DH option. I have to put my bias aside, though, because dear God, do I hate Rhys Hoskins. Like, he's my least favorite Philly. I despise that schmuck. I'm still annoyed at him for having the audacity to think that Jacob Rain was purposely pitching to his ass all those years ago. That when they match up like a year later, hits a home run off of a minor league schmuck, no less, in which Jacob Rain should have never been in the MLB, that they make a whole spectacle out of it. I don't know. I don't fuck with Rhys. I'm just plain all the fanness of me is talking. I don't like the schmuck. I don't. But if he comes to Queens, then of course I'm going to support him. Of course I'm going to gas him up because he is a power bat, absolutely. And he does fit the bill there at DH. There's no denying that. But man, I've never been a Rhys guy. That would be like to a lesser degree, like a Chase Utley, or Jimmy Rollins, just guys that you just hated growing up, regardless of what happened with Chase and Tejada all those years ago. Just regardless, I've always hated Chase Utley. You know what I mean? Like, there's just certain guys that you just you never want to see in Mets orange and blue. And sometimes it's because their personality, other times it's because they're kicking your teeth in and you just want nothing to do with them, whatever it may be. I'm left with a question mark on the Rhys Hoskins pursuit, personally. Do I think Eduardo Rodriguez can go to the Mets? Yes, I do. And I just realized I skipped over a key topic tonight. And I'm going to talk about it now. And we're going to wrap things up. And I apologize. It always happens I miss something. Jordan Montgomery. Is he more likely than Eduardo Rodriguez and Blake Snell? Recent reports from Andy Martino would indicate that is the case. However, I will say this. While speaking with people through the grapevine that know a thing or two on what's going on in baseball today, I have heard that while the Mets have a lot of interest in Jordan Montgomery, there is speculation on the type of interest that Monty has in returning to New York as a whole. So not talking specifically Queens, but talking as a whole. Because Monty's relationship with the Yanks, that ended in a very sour way. The Yanks, reports that the Yanks have interest in bringing back Monty. Highly doubt that's going to happen. I think that bridge is burned. He was caught quite off guard by that trade, as was that clubhouse 2 off seasons ago. And that is my big concern with Monty. I just don't know if he wants to go back to New York or not. He can handle New York without a problem. That's what makes him very appealing, on top of being a new World Series champion, playing up a career best season, just under 200 innings, a phenomenal year, spending time with the Cardinals, and then the World Series champ Texas Rangers, and he played a heavy part in that in the offseason. But I just don't know. I don't know if he wants to go back to New York. So until we find that out, I have natural concerns with Monty in that pursuit. I think the Mets really love the guy and would love to have him, but we need to find out. We need to find out if he's willing to come back to New York, regardless on which borough it'll be. But having said that, yes, he's still deemed right now as a stronger likelihood than Eduardo Rodriguez. Blake Snell isn't happening. Unless we hear reports that the Mets are heavily interested in Blake Snell, I don't see that happening. I don't think the Mets want to give the years or the money to him. And while he's a phenomenal pitcher, Cy Young Award winner, multi-time Cy Young Award winner, I understand that. I really do, especially when you evaluate the pitching market for next offseason and the couple years going forward. This is a thing about David Stearns and this new Ran Mets. They're evaluating everything beyond just 2024 because they don't have the adamancy, the pressure to win now the way they had with Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer, because they had to have that pressure then. By acquiring those guys, the Mets took the gamble and a short-term options, knowing they had to go all in, knowing that these guys aren't going to last forever, and it fell completely flat on its face. So now the Mets don't have that same pressure like they had with those Grizzle vets in rotation, which gives them more leeway to evaluate things. So saying, hey, these options are nice, but next year, that's a perfect fit for right field. That's a perfect fit as our setup man. That's a perfect fit for our number 4 starter. That's a perfect fit for our future ace. So they have to weigh all those properly. And that is why you may not see the Mets maybe land some guys that may be top dogs in the free agent market this year. But if, say, they were free agents next year, it would not be the case. And that goes in hand, of course, behind their decision-making. So between Shota Imanaga, Eduardo Rodriguez, Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, the guys I feel most likely in order I would put, Jordan Montgomery, Shota Imanaga, Eduardo Rodriguez. And I really think the markets for Monty and Erod in particular are going to fall very fast. Erod, a lot to like there. I've yet to do an individual video on him. May come out early tomorrow, barring any other news. Mets have been linked in for a couple days now, thanks to Michael Mayer of Mets Rise. But Erod, while he put up a career year with the Detroit Tigers, is really around a career 4 ERA pitcher and has not shown the consistency the way that Monty has. And for the people that are saying, well, Monty and Erod profile eerily similar, why should you give Monty a much more substantial, longer-term contract than Erod? But it goes back to what I just said. It's the consistency. It's the type of season Monty just had and how the market evaluates someone like him at this point versus markets in years past on how pitchers have been sold off. Monty's in a great position, given that it's a top-heavy market, to get an absolute bag on north of 6-7 years between 150 200 million. Erod is not going to be in that realm. He may, I could see Erod getting anywhere from a 3 to 5 year deal, maybe including some options. It's going to be an interesting one to evaluate Eduardo Rodriguez. And while I wouldn't scoff at the notion should the Mets land him, I can tell that the Mets obviously like Monty more than him. and Snell for different reasons, why he makes more of a sense. But Erod, again, another name that we'll be watching. Again, talented pitcher, but I have concerns with not only consistency, but his lack of health that we have seen in time to time in recent years. For all those reasons, Monty is a guy that I personally would like more than others. But if the Mets do land Erod, there will be reasons behind it, and I'll gladly break him down and say, hey, this is what I like about him, and this is what I not like about him. And now we're going to see how he hopefully thrives in the rotation should they again land him. Kevin, have a great night, my friend. It really does mean a lot. Monty is a playoff performer, as I mentioned. John, yes, you're absolutely right. But with that being said, everybody, that is about going to wrap up the show. I'm usually a little bit more long-winded tonight than I like. That's thanks to me doing a recap the first 15, 20 minutes on lower level signings the Mets have done to this point. But stay tuned. Live tomorrow at least once, if not multiple times. Live Tuesday at least once, if not multiple times. Live Wednesday at least once, if not multiple times. And we'll go from there. So consistent coverage, all winter meetings, all off-season long, all year long here on WardyNYM for your New York Metropolitan news, rumors, breaking news type live streams, report type live streams, post-game shows that we'll be doing to an absolute T all regular season long, and then some is what we'll be doing. So thank you again, everybody, for watching live on our replay. Let me know your thoughts down below for people on replay, your biggest takeaway from tonight's live show and the latest news and rumors, and stay tuned for tomorrow's live show, along with most likely at least one individual video. Until then, have a great night, day,